The Data Collectors. Written by Danielle Palli. Narrated by Graham Mack and Danielle Palli. 25. News Story. Monday evening, 5 years after the assembly. Fatima and Roman were at the cottage, snuggled on the living room couch under a blanket, with 2 glasses of wine and an assorted cheese plate and grapes sitting on the end table. Occasionally, Roman would reach for a grape and offer it to Fatima, who playfully let him feed it to her. Roman clicked the remote, and the TV sprang into life. He was about to switch to movie streaming when a breaking news story graphic popped up on the screen. What followed was a location shot of a small church with crime tape wrapped around the building and investigators shooting photos and taking notes.
Hold on.
Fatima stopped him.
That's Lucene's church. Turn that up,
she commanded. He obeyed, and the two watched a young reporter give details about the scene behind her.
This just in, we've learned that Reverend Isabella of the Singing River Sanctuary in Paris has been shot. She was rushed to the nearby hospital where she is in stable condition. No word yet as to what happened. We'll bring you continuing coverage on this developing story. Oh my gosh.
Fatima whined.
Lucene spends a lot of time there, even when she's not working. I hope she wasn't there.
Fatima unwrapped herself from the blanket and leapt to her feet. Can you call her cell phone? Roman sat up, concerned.
No, she doesn't carry one.
Who on this planet doesn't carry a cell phone? Roman was shocked.
She doesn't. She says they're too easy to track. We have to call the police. And more breaking news.
The TV interrupted again. The news anchor had a momentary look of glee on her good fortune, being there for not one but 2 important stories. She quickly recovered, touching her ear as if receiving information from an ear mic.
We've just learned that a man was found dead on his boat at Port Haymond Marina. Further details are being withheld as his death has been ruled as suspicious.
Fatima's face turned pale. Roman tossed the blanket aside and stood. It's not what you think, Roman explained, waving his hands as he spoke.
Jim Sparks,
she whispered.
Dead.
I know, but that had nothing to do with me. I'm as shocked as you are. For once, the trusting Fatima appeared unconvinced.
We have to call the police.
She backed away slowly. When she'd reached the kitchen, she bolted for the door. She'd gotten as far as unlatching it and turning the knob. Stop, Roman commanded, or I'll shoot! Fatima paused, glancing over her shoulder, her heart rate beginning to escalate. Roman stood in the living room, a gun pointed at her chest. Please close the door. Fatima obeyed. I didn't kill Jim Sparks, he claimed.
I'm having a hard time believing you when you got a gun pointed at me.
Fatima's eyes welled up. Her hands were shaking. Roman instinctively moved toward her to comfort her before catching himself. If they found Jim Sparks, they can find me. We need to leave. It isn't safe here.
Again, gun,
she pointed out. He slowly pointed the gun toward the ceiling, holding it with 2 hands at the ready. I was afraid you'd run away. If they find you first, they will torture you to get to me.
Who are they?
Fatima whined. I'll explain on the way. Just get your cat and I'll tell you where to drive us.
My cat?
She repeated, confused.
You mean car?
No, cat. There's a good chance we won't be coming back for a while. I'm pretty sure you don't want to leave him behind. Now, I'm going to put the gun down if you promise not to run away. Suddenly, Fatima choked out a laugh. What's so funny? He wanted to know.
Put the gun down, silly. I'll get Bagheera.
She made her way toward Lucene's bedroom, the cat's favorite hangout.
I don't know of any murderer who'd be concerned about killing me but saving my cat.
26. Revelation. Monday evening, 5 years after the assembly.
We need to call the police, not hide out in your apartment.
Fatima tugged her arm free from Roman's grasp as he pulled her inside and shut the door. She set her large paisley beach bag on the carpet, and Bagheera leapt to his freedom, instantly beginning to sniff around his new surroundings. No police, Roman barked back, running to the living room window and peeking around the red blackout drapes to make sure they weren't followed. I've already told you they'd like nothing more than to see all of my kind destroyed.
Well, we can't just stay here and do nothing.
Fatima stopped mid-sentence as her eyes fell on the far wall of the next room, partially revealed through the open bedroom door. Roman glanced over her shoulder. As he caught wind of what she saw, he rushed to the door to close it, but she'd already made her way inside.
What is this?
She stared, mesmerized by the wall-to-wall photographs and notes strung all over it, like a giant collage. Photographs of her going to work, of Lucene and Tanager dancing, of Fatima talking to Ivan in the yard, a calendar noting arrival and departure times, and a US map with thumbtacks all over it. "It's part of my research," Roman explained hastily, slipping past Fatima and guiding her out of the room, closing the door behind them.
But there are pictures of me on that wall.
Fatima's voice trembled softly as her eyes began to well up. She slumped against the wall and put a hand to her heart.
Is that all I am? Research?
Roman's spirit crumbled as he choked back tears. "Of course not, my love." He rushed to hug her, only to discover her struggling to stand. He wrapped his long arms around her plump waist, supporting her as they made their way across the room, where she sank into the couch.
I'm okay.
Fatima waved a hand to dismiss him.
Just need to catch my breath.
She was surprised by the episode, as she hadn't had one since... She tried to remember. It had to have been about 5 years. Not since Lucene had come to live with her. That much she knew. "Meeting you was a happy accident," Roman gushed, pulling her attention back. "You saved me, Fa." He knelt in front of her, enfolding her hands into his. Fatima tensed up, pulling her hands away as Roman searched her eyes questioningly.
Fa? Is that supposed to be some sort of nickname for me?
But he backed away slowly, mouthing the words, "Fatima," then "Fa," as if trying to figure something out. There was a space in his memory that was blank, and he struggled desperately to remember as one might struggle to remember a once vivid dream. He backed into the living room wall, sliding down it like a rag doll until he had come to his knees. Wrapping his arms around his legs, he laid his head in his lap and began rocking like a small, scared child. "Fa," he cried as he rocked. "How could I forget you?" Fatima struggled to her feet, looking helplessly from side to side, wondering which disaster to deal with first, her missing friend or the broken man at her feet. Who could she call for help? And who would actually believe her? Remembering her fallen purse, she rushed to it, fumbling nervously for her phone. She hit a speed dial number, waiting impatiently, eyeing the fallen man on the floor who was still very much in his own world. "Hello, Fatima," Ivan answered, his voice sounding strange.
Hi.
Fatima choked back.
Ivan, I need your help.
"What's wrong?" Ivan voiced concern. "Are you hurt?"
No, it's Roman.
Fatima swore she could feel Ivan cringe on the other end of the phone line.
He's had a breakdown and is acting strange.
"Seems to be going round," Ivan answered. "Got my hands full with a similar situation myself." Fatima could hear strange rustling sounds over the phone.
Is everybody going crazy? Never mind, it gets worse. Lucene's in trouble.
"I know that, but how do you?"
Wait, what?
"I just spoke with her at the church." "Crap, I wasn't supposed to tell you that."
What? When?
"I don't know, maybe 30 minutes or so. Why?" Fatima let out several uncharacteristic expletives.
Well, you must have just missed the shooting.
"What?"
Never mind, Lucene's not there. At least I don't think she was. I don't know where she is. Just get here and we'll figure it out.
"Aye, where are you now?" Ivan asked.
I'm in Roman's apartment.
Another cringe. Fatima rambled off the building number and street. Ivan made a mental note of it, repeating it in his head to make it stick. "You may want to wait out front. He's acting kooky."
Nah, I'm okay. And I think we should lay low. Please be careful and thank you.
Ivan felt a little pang of feeling in the centre of his chest near his heart. Just a little. "Aye, be there in a jiff." There was doubt in his voice. Ivan did his best to use his upper body to push the bike off him, succeeding only in moving the handlebars so that one was now poking into his ribcage. It was at that moment that Cepheus reached into one of the drawers and pulled out a plastic syringe. "Oh, shit," Ivan mumbled. "Man, wait!" Too late. Cepheus had already run back outside, presumably to the tree trunk to hide his latest find. Ivan waited for what seemed like an eternity, but Cepheus eventually came back. "Cepheus, old friend, I need you to get over here and help me." Cepheus ignored him. Ivan felt a numbness start to overtake the lower half of his body as the weight of the bike began cutting off circulation. "Cepheus!" He tried again, a little louder, but hopefully not loud enough to inspire another violent reaction. "Lucene and Fatima need us!" Cepheus, who had been poring through a box of metal fasteners, suddenly looked up. Lucene in trouble? Ivan could almost see a grey cloud over his friend's head, as if a storm were beginning to clear and sunlight was about to come through. "I thought she was dead." "Why would you think that?" Ivan's eyes grew wide, wondering if he'd somehow been involved with Lucene's current disappearance. "Never mind. I need you to focus. Put down the toys and help me." "Of course," Cepheus said, quietly stepping down off the table with cat-like grace and brushing off his dark pants, as if to brush off cobwebs. Suddenly realizing his friend was pinned under the motorcycle, he quickly reached down and lifted it off him with one hand. With the other, he offered his hand and hoisted Ivan awkwardly to his feet. "Thanks, man." Ivan struggled for a moment to stand upright and took a few cautious steps to make sure everything was still in working order. "Are you okay?" Cepheus asked. "I hope I didn't do anything inappropriate." "You were a hot mess, you were," Ivan blurted out. Diplomacy was not his strong suit. "But that doesn't matter right now. We've got to get going and fast. Follow me." The two rushed to Ivan's van, nicknamed the Mongrel, because of its unique build and functionality. It sat in the covered carport next to the driveway. Cepheus instinctively climbed in the back, while Ivan settled into the driver's seat up front. Ivan wasted no time in backing down the drive and heading out. As they passed Fatima's house, there was a roaring explosion as the cottage burst into flames. Remnants of the explosion floated around the Mongrel. Startled, both Ivan and Cepheus jumped in their seats. A moment later, there were two more explosions. Peering in the rearview mirror, Ivan saw both his and Fatima's home and his workshop on fire. Instinctively, he hit the gas pedal and didn't look back again. Ivan's heart raced when it sank in that if they had wasted even half a minute more, they would be dead. "Tell me the truth, Cepheus. I won't be mad." "It was not me, my friend," Cepheus answered, reading his thoughts. His mind now returning to clarity for the first time without requiring medication. "It was they." "They who?" Ivan asked over his shoulder as he turned the corner and headed toward the highway. "The Royals." There was a loud knock at the door. Fatima quickly eyed the peephole, seeing a thick red beard staring back at her. She opened the door, and Ivan and Cepheus rushed in. "You're not hurt, are you?" Ivan took Fatima by the shoulders, concerned.
"No, I'm fine. It's him I'm worried about."
She gave a confused once-over at the lanky man who accompanied her neighbour.
"Your eyes are very yellow,"
she said, almost transfixed. "And your hair," Cepheus answered in a deep voice, "is very purple."
"It's good that we're both so observant,"
Fatima whispered back in something between a joke and surprise. Ivan wrapped an arm around her, concerned. "He's not from around here," Ivan said.
"So I gathered,"
Fatima whispered back, sinking into Ivan's chest for support. Cepheus went over to the crumpled man cautiously. He sank down next to Roman, who picked his head up and looked at Cepheus, his eyes suddenly widening with recognition. "You are one of them?" He wiped his tears with his sleeve. Fatima and Ivan watched the scene with a mixture of amazement and concern. "I am," Cepheus answered. "You've been searching for us for quite some time, haven't you?" Bagheera came out from behind the curtain where he'd been hiding and began rubbing up against Cepheus's leg. He reached out to scratch behind the cat's ear, but did not turn his attention from Roman. Cepheus hung his head for a moment, as if listening to something, and then nodded back in understanding. "Was he sick for very long?" 2 years, Roman sobbed, looking at Fatima as if to apologize. Fatima smiled back, weakly, a mix of understanding and disappointment. "I heard about the data collectors during the televised report of the newly formed IPP many years ago, when Section 1 first revealed their presence on Earth. I thought that if they cared that much about the planet and had the technology to help us, that we might have had the resources to save your beloved," Cepheus acknowledged. "Yes," Roman answered. "Maybe even take us back with you. To your planet." Roman looked at Fatima pleadingly. "I didn't remember any of this until now, I swear to you. Lovely Fatima. I didn't intend to hurt you."
"I know."
Fatima pulled away from Ivan and rushed to Roman's side, kneeling down and touching a hand to his shoulder.
"Who was he?"
Ivan pretended not to care. "He was a monk, originally from the outermost region of Meka. It's billions of light years from here. His people lived on a small planet, very primitive. They relied on their sovereign for everything: food, shelter, healing, protection. And then Far was born." Roman went on to explain that when Far was a boy, he demonstrated the unique power of transporting himself over great distances to avoid danger. He was also a prophet, and that made their sovereign uncomfortable. Far was nothing but a skinny, frail little thing with blonde hair and pale green eyes. There was nothing intimidating about him, and yet...
"They tried to kill him."
Fatima filled the gap. Roman nodded. "Yes. His family told him to run to the farthest place he could. That's how he found his way to Earth. I met him 13 years ago when he was an adult."
"Kind of funny when you think about it."
Fatima wiped a tear from her eye.
"You tried to suppress your pain so much, you ended up dating a fat woman with lavender hair and grey eyes. The absolute opposite of Far."
She laughed a little, though she wasn't really happy. "Oh, sweet Fatima." Roman touched her hand. "You are so beautiful and wonderful. And I do have love for you. I just forgot everything for a while. I'm sorry." "Oi!" Ivan's eyes widened, being pulled away from the story. "We needs to warn Tanager about not coming back to the house."
"What happened to the house?"
Fatima asked. "The royals happened," Ivan answered, still not completely certain who they were. There was another knock at the door. "Where is Cepheus?" Tanager demanded, storming in, syringe in hand, as Ivan opened the door, quickly shutting it after him. Seeing Cepheus, Tanager immediately rushed to his friend's side, leaning down and holding the syringe to Cepheus's neck. Ivan grabbed his arm and shook his head. "He doesn't need it." He nodded to Cepheus, having left Roman to Fatima's care. Cepheus was now sitting cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed as if in deep meditation. "You mean he recovered? On his own?" Ivan nodded again. Tanager let out a relieved smile, mixed with hope.
"How?"
Fatima began, pausing for a moment to take in Tanager's new wardrobe. "Tracking device," Tanager explained impatiently. "Cepheus, while my mentor and the brightest man I know, is still under watch. Unfortunately, I'm not as intuitive as he, so..."
"So you..."
"I know him." He finished her sentence, pointing. "Yes." "Will all of you please begin speaking English? You're making my head hurt," Ivan complained. "What in the hell is under watch?" "Where is Lucene?" Tanager demanded, finally taking a moment to survey the room.
"We don't know,"
Fatima answered. She was last seen at the church where she works, but there was a shooting and she's missing." Tanager's face turned white, and he held back the tremors he felt in his hands and heart. He turned back to Cepheus. "I know where the royals are. They're hiding in an abandoned warehouse at the marina. Can you sense if Lucene is near there?" Cepheus lifted his chin slightly to acknowledge the question, but did not open his eyes.
Why would he know where she is?
Fatima questioned, pointing to the yellow-eyed Cepheus on the floor. "Because he's her mentor," Tanager answered. "She doesn't remember, but he trained her as a small child." This didn't seem to clarify things for her. "He's psychic," Tanager said. That seemed the easiest explanation. Fatima nodded. Tanager lamented the fact that he was supposed to have a similar vibration as Lucene, and yet he couldn't connect with her. Truth be told, neither one of them had been trained properly. "You mean I was right?" Roman looked hopeful. "She's the one?" "The one," Tanager agreed.
One what?
"She's not from here. She's very special."
You mean that she's an
Fatima couldn't believe she was saying this.
alien?
"Yes, and she's not safe here. We need to take her home."
But this is a home.
Fatima's chest began to rise as Ivan motioned with his hands to lower her voice, pointing to Cepheus. She turned to Ivan.
So we're all just okay with this?
"I was wrong, Fatima." Roman struggled to his feet. "My mind wasn't right. They're not experimenting on humans. They are attempting to genetically modify data collectors to accurately gather and report information back home. Somehow, that got switched up in my head."
Genetically modify?
Fatima was incredulous.
How's that better?
"Fatima, please," Tanager pointed to Cepheus again. "First, we need to find her." Fatima nodded and bit her lip. The group waited in silence for what seemed like hours. In reality, it was close to 20 minutes. Cepheus's eyes popped open. "I know where she is." 27. The Red Door. Right now, 5 years after the assembly.
"We've been so stupid,"
Hamish exclaimed, rubbing his forehead tiredly.
"For the longest time, we assumed that if we simply learned the special gene-splicing cocktail added to the data collector's DNA, we could replicate the process and transmute our own royal army."
Lucene struggled with the restraints that had her strapped to the hospital gurney.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Lucene panicked.
You've got the wrong girl.
Lucene let out a yelp as an attendant dressed in a long grey lab coat thrust a needle haphazardly into Lucene's arm.
Don't lie to us, you stupid creature.
Sabrina stuck her face right above Lucene's, spitting a little as she spoke.
"Don't you know who you are, my dear?"
Hamish asked in a deceptively calm and collected voice.
"What you are capable of?"
As Lucene stared at the harsh fluorescent lights above her head, the world around her began to fade.
"Begin the process,"
Hamish ordered, to the 2 female attendants in the room.
"We haven't much time."
Lucene dreamed as she'd never dreamed before. She found herself floating back to the house she lived in when her parents were still alive. She was 5, and it was one of the many training sessions that they would have together. Her father sat across from her on the floor, his legs folded under him, cross-legged. His eyes were closed, in a deep state of meditation. Lucene did her best to mimic his movements. She rested her hands solemnly in her lap as she also sat cross-legged, with her eyes closed. She had no innate flexibility, and her thighs popped up off the floor like winged butterflies. She felt jittery, and found it difficult to sit still. "Stop fidgeting, Lucene, and concentrate," her father said gently. Lucene let out a frustrated sigh and tried again. Her brow furrowed in deep concentration. From across the room, Lucene's mother watched with interest. She sat at a high-top table in the kitchen, nervously folding and unfolding the same dinner napkins over and over. Both Lucene and her father sat there for some minutes before his eyes popped open with excitement. "A green elephant," he proclaimed. Lucene smiled proudly.
Yes,
She answered, thinking back to a plush toy her dad had won for her at the state fair a few months back.
a green elephant.
Very good, Lucene. Your powers of transmitting messages are...
You thought I was going to picture a yellow sunflower in my head.
Lucene giggled, just thinking about the giant sunflower mural on the wall in her bedroom. It made her happy every time she saw it. But, her father began.
And Mom is worried they'll soon discover who I am and take me away.
Her face fell. Dora stopped folding and shot her husband a concerned look. He simply nodded. Very good, Lucene. But how did you manage to both transmit an image while also receiving what I was thinking and what your mother was thinking at the same time?
I'm not sure.
Lucene furrowed her brows once again.
I was thinking really hard about the green elephant, and then it turned into a sunflower. You were handing the flower to me. Then there was these strange-looking lizard people trying to take me away. Mommy stared through the window. She wanted to help, but she couldn't move. They popped into my head so fast I didn't have time to stop them.
Lucene's mother came into the room to join them, sitting down next to her, running a hand through the girl's long hair.
Yes, that's right, Lucene. And what should you do if you ever see those lizard people?
Lucene didn't even have to pause and take a deep breath. Without thinking, she answered.
Run.
Lucene awoke with a throbbing headache that made her sick to her stomach. Bright lights blinded her as they flashed repeatedly in her face. Sounds reverberated in her ears, as if someone had turned up the volume on every radio station on the planet, causing a cacophony of words, music, and background noise. Random smells bombarded her olfactory system, and her tongue was heavy with the taste of metal. Her skin itched with the feeling of crawling bugs, though she was unable to sit up or move her arms or legs to swat them away. Her neck ached, and she realized that her head was somehow pinned against the gurney too, making it impossible to get the kink out of her neck. Her pulse quickened, and she desperately fought the urge to do what one of the loud voices was urging her to do.
Go ahead and scream,
Sabrina admonished bitterly. From just a few miles away, a deep voice cut through the chaos. Lucene, can you hear me?
Cepheus.
Lucene could barely hear him among the other voices.
If that's you, please send help.
Focus on my voice, his thoughts transmitted. Filter everything else out except my voice.
I don't know how,
she thought. Yes, you do, Cepheus responded. Close your eyes if you need to. Remember your training. Now more than ever, you must remember. Lucene clenched her eyelids tightly together as she flashed back to the training her parents had given her. From the time since she could first remember, to the day the lightning struck and her parents were taken away forever. That was nearly 5 years of almost daily lessons in mentally sending and receiving messages, of picking up what others were sensing and feeling. Humans, animals, plants, anything that lived and breathed. The memories flooded back with squall-like force. In addition to all the other sensations, it was almost unbearable.
I can't. Too much noise.
Lucene's face and arms pulsed with heat, as if they were on fire. Focus on my voice, Cepheus ordered, and more forcefully now. Silence everything else. Dizzy and on the verge of passing out, Lucene's world suddenly went quiet. She sucked in a deep breath.
Okay.
She answered simply. Very good, Cepheus answered. Keep breathing. Inhale. In. Exhale. Out. This was familiar to Lucene, not just from working with her parents. His voice and very presence were familiar, though. She returned her attention to the task in hand. From outside her consciousness, Sabrina snapped.
What happened? What's wrong with her?
She nudged Lucene's arm, but got no response. It sounded to Lucene as if Sabrina were far away, speaking from the other end of a tunnel.
Probably the same thing that happened to all the others, including our son, Hamish's lazy voice answered. You've driven them mad.
But she's supposed to be the gifted one, born of 2 data collectors with perfect DNA structure.
She pushed one of Lucene's eyelids open quizzically and peered into the motionless hazel eye.
Do you think we can still take DNA samples even if she dies?
From inside her mind, Lucene awaited more instructions. Now, Cepheus continued, I need you to imagine that someone has opened a window and there's a breeze gently blowing in. With it is a scent. What do you smell? She imagined the window. She could almost feel the breeze somehow. Lucene expected to smell one of Fatima's apple cinnamon pies baking in the oven, or the scent of fresh-cut flowers from the garden. But she didn't. Surprised, she transmitted,
I smell brackish water. Disinfectant? And something loamy.
Excellent, Lucene, Cepheus praised. Now keep your eyes closed and imagine there's a radio in the room. Someone has just switched it on and has tuned it into a single channel. Only let one channel in. Have you got it?
Yes.
What do you hear?
I hear a woman with a grating voice. Sabrina. Her name is Sabrina.
Lucene could feel the tension and fear emanating from Cepheus's energy.
Who is she?
Noises began to overtake her mind once more. Cars, horns, voices, music, as if all the stations were on at once. It doesn't matter. Stay focused. Filter the noises that do not matter. Only let the important ones in.
I hear gulls and water hitting the side of a dock, and the sounds of a motorized boat in the distance. I think I'm at the dock, Cepheus, except...
Except what?
The birds are next to me, but all the other sounds are below me. I think I'm in the air.
We're coming for you, Lucene. Stay calm, and remember, you are in control of your experiences you let in. In that quiet space, Lucene was suddenly aware of a series of doors in front of her. A few opened on their own, letting in a swarm of sights, smells, tastes, and sounds. In her mind's eye, she slammed them closed. She even closed the window and turned off the radio. In the silence, she asked herself,
which door will tell me why Cepheus is so familiar to me?
Through the darkness, a red door appeared. She walked over and stopped cold. Her face felt flushed and her palms sweaty. She took a deep breath, then opened the door. Suddenly she was transported back in time and found herself sitting in the back seat of the family's SUV during a storm. Her mother peered nervously over her shoulder from the front passenger side as her father's hands gripped the steering wheel. She felt terror. She was crying out to someone for help. Who? Cepheus. The memories returned, and it became clear how she knew him, why his voice was so familiar when he stood to speak at the IPP convention several years ago, and when he first appeared in her home. He was her mentor. Her parents had taught her basic meditation and intuitive proficiencies. But she needed more than that. Beyond sending and receiving messages from a single source, she received insight from her entire surroundings, and was even able to, in some way, manipulate the experiences of those around her. This caused them concern, and they turned to Tara for guidance. Because of her potential power, They paired her with Cepheus, a well-respected scholar and skilled empath. It was hoped that she would grow to be capable of transmitting data about her surroundings back to Erde more regularly, and use her skills to make Earth a better place. Her parents would ensure that she was morally grounded, and would not use her power in a dangerous manner.
How on earth could I have forgotten all that?
She wondered. She knew the answer. The lightning strike. Losing her parents that evening, and the fear of being in danger, the perfect cocktail for forgetting. Then take into account being thrust into the foster care system and shuffled from one home to the next. It's no wonder this got locked away deep inside her until today. From the far corners of her consciousness, Lucene heard a knock at the door. Being careful to only open one door at a time, she shut the red door in her mind and waited. A dark grey door appeared.
What do you want?
Sabrina's voice demanded in the distance. Lucene mentally opened the door to see who was on the other side.
They're closing in. It's time to move.
Drake. Even with her eyes closed, she could visualize the young man sauntering through the door to where she lay, confident in all circumstances. The only difference between her vision and reality was that she could actually see herself lying on the gurney, pale and helpless. He peered down at her with disinterest, and yet there was something else that went deeper. Regret?
Well, whose fault is that?
Sabrina snapped.
You can't have everything, Your Majesty, Drake sucked in his breath. You can't blow up a casino holding all remaining IPP members on Earth and expect there not to be an investigation.
Fine.
Sabrina waved her long fingers at the attendant.
Wrap her up, she's going with us.
It won't work,
Lucene whispered, her eyes snapping open. Sabrina peered down at her in surprise.
What won't work, my dear?
Hamish asked, almost sorrowfully.
Even if you figure out the recipe, it won't work on you.
Why the hell not?
Sabrina pushed Hamish out of the way.
Is it species specific?
Nope.
Lucene answered groggily.
Nope.
You have to have empathy and you have to train it regularly. You're impatient, impulsive, and lack even basic empathy for others.
Sabrina's eyes turned yellow, and her clay-like nails began to rapidly grow as she transformed into her lizard state.
You stupid.
She raised an arm. Hamish caught it.
Please, darling, he reasoned. If you destroy her in anger, then we've lost. She can't teach us empathy if she's dead.
Lucene was on a roll, as knowledge came pouring in and flowed right back out again.
You can't explain it verbally.
She emphasized verbally and smacked her lips together.
You communicate with your heart and your thoughts, in that order, over great distance.
Can those messages be intercepted?
Sabrina demanded as they began rolling the gurney toward an upright pod-like structure, presumably a protective shell so that Lucene would keep for the long journey. They pulled the strap off her head and neck in preparation.
Only if you're on the same frequency.
Lucene groggily rolled her head to one side, happy that it now swung freely from side to side.
And what frequency is that?
Sabrina spat.
Love.
Lucene answered.
That's why messages go back and forth between the data collectors and Tara without anyone noticing.
Lucene smiled.
It's so simple when you think about it. The peacekeepers are like none other. Plans for restoration and peace right under your nose, but you couldn't sense it.
Lucene snorted and began laughing drunkenly. Once again, Sabrina raised an arm. Once again, Hamish intercepted.
Earthlings are nothing but germs in a petri dish that I can wipe out by sending one tsunami. And what did the peacekeepers learn about war and self-defense? Nothing. That's why they were so easy to destroy one by one. Couldn't even withstand a simple interrogation without dying or going insane.
Sabrina paused for a moment, peering so close to Lucene that she could smell the lizard's acidic breath.
Neither could your son,
Lucene replied softly.
Cepheus, he's your son, isn't he? He was a royal, but he couldn't withstand your torture either.
Could he? That wasn't my fault.
A brief look of something like remorse crossed her face.
I hadn't realised that living among the peacekeepers for all those years would have turned him into putty.
Sovereigns, a soldier addressed them as he burst into the room. Pardon my intrusion, but I believe we have visitors who could impede our departure. Do we destroy or imprison?
Kill them,
Sabrina announced.
What good are earthlings to us?
Not earthlings, he answered. Your son.
Let me handle this, my dear, Hamish replied calmly. You must prepare for departure.
And trust you to do what needs to be done.
Sabrina barked.
Not on my life.